I'll wait for the recording to go on. There we are. Right. Morning, everyone, to the Fire and Performance Management meeting. Are there any apologies for absence before we start?
Yes, there's Councillor Wright, Councillor Buckley, Councillor Isaac and Councillor Ford. Will give their apologies.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. If we move on to item 2, declarations of interest. Members of the Fire Rescue Authority reminded their personal responsibility to declare both orally and in writing any personal and or prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 2000, the Fire and Rescue Authority standing orders and the members' code of conduct. Now, has anybody got any declarations that they'd like to declare? No, we all gone quiet. I've got one through Newing Station, which is mentioned in the report, and I'm one quite sure where the Public Service Board was mentioned. I sit on the scrutiny with Jen Morgan.
I couldn't find it unless I missed it.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. All right, we all that. We got noted that. The next person is, the next item on the agenda is a chairperson's announcement. I'd like to welcome all the Audit Wales officers this morning to the meeting. And also, I'd like to give my thanks to Cumbrian Station's fire cadets in attending Remembrance Day Parade in Pontnewydd in Cumbrian. They're a new corps of young people, and they were really good for their service, really well maintained, and I was very proud of them. So I'd like that notice if we could, please. Right, we move on to item 4, to receive the minutes of the Finance Audit and Performance Management Committee held on the 18th of September 2023, and that's on page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. And page 9. Does anybody like to move and second them? If everybody's in agreement?
I'll move it.
Any comments from any members, or?
Can you second it?
Second it.
Yeah, thank you both. Does anybody want to raise anything from their minutes? No? Right then, if we move on to reports for decision now, item 5, the revenue monitoring report on page 11. Lisa, is that one that you've got a lead on? You'd like to lead on that? Thank you.
It is, Chair. Thank you very much, and good morning, members, and good morning, officers as well. So this is the second revenue monitoring report of this financial year, and this provides an update of the major changes since the last meeting, which was the 18th of September. So this report provides detail on the decrease in the projected overspend that we reported previously. So previously, projection of 1.7 million overspend is reduced to 1.33. It's a £342,000 reduction. And I'll just take you through that in this report. As you can see, there's a number of appendices there. Appendix 1, Appendix 2, Appendix 3, the reserve statement, and some grant funded initiative information on Appendix 4 and 5. Going through the detail of the report, there's a small reduction in salary forecast of 29,000, and that's the result of some increases and decreases. The pay awards for Green Book staff are worked in, and there's some increases there for pensions and firefighter contributions. Altogether, there's a net decrease in the overspend of 29,000. The major changes all occur in the non-salary element of the budget. So that's 104 in non-salary elements and 209 in increase in grant and income streams for the year. So if I just take you through these, we've got 147,000 increase in overspend for premises. That's largely down to two things. That's repairs and maintenance portion of that budget. There's about 5 or 6 different headings in property. So that's retained and maintenance. It's decreased by 130,000 because we have moved the work that was penciled in there for solar panels. We've shifted that over into the capital programme where it sits more appropriately, and we've got some funding to support that work there. There's also been a rectification in the rates and a very small decrease in costs there, and they are adding back to that 147 reduction in overspend. Supplies and services, 87,000 increase in overspend. A lot of these increases are actually offset lower down in grants. So what we tend to do with our costs and our income is we gross them out so we can see exactly what something's costing us and exactly what the income is offset in that. And the increases here for supplies and services relate largely to home fire safety equipment. So that's all the visits that our community safety team go out and do for us, and increases in subscriptions. So that's coming back to the 87 there. There's some smaller overs and unders, and they largely offset in each other, but those are the two significant areas there. Moving on to fleet, there is an increase in the underspend there, and this is largely related to a small decrease in fuel costs, as we've probably all seen in the last year, and also we've introduced more electric vehicles into our fleet, and that is having an impact, although very difficult to determine exactly what, but we are seeing the decreases in costs there. Contracted services, so this is the consultancy costs, things that are out-house for the service. There's a £233,000 increase there in these costs, and that's largely to do with two areas. That's the investigatory work related to HR cases that are undertaken on behalf of the service, and increased costs of the cultural review. And members will be aware that those costs of the cultural review, they're all going to be funded from the reserves as agreed at the beginning of the year. If we move on to capital costs there, there's an 178,000 increase in decrease in overspend, and this area, as we know, is related to our capital investment plans, which is the next report. So I'll go over the detail of that then, but basically there's a £4 million decrease in estimated capital schemes. What that has had is a knock-on effect for our MRP charges in particular, MRP standing for minimum revenue provision, and that's indicative of the amounts that we set aside to repay borrowing on our investment work. As you know, we don't receive any settlement towards our capital schemes. And then income then is broken down into grants and other income. And the largest part of that is a grant for firefighter apprentices of 246 that is coming to the service. So all those changes there are adding back to the £342,000 difference that I outlined at the beginning of the report, and brings us to an overspend for the year of 3.25 million. So if I take you down to Appendix 1, that's on page 17. This gives you an overview of the original budget for the year and what our forecast is. There's a revenue forecast at the 31st of March there, and you can see at the bottom there the 1.325 million that I've outlined and all the areas of variances. And then the next appendix, which is Appendix 2, that will give you more of the differences between September's report and this report here. And it'll break down that £342,000 difference for you. As touched on with costs in contracted services, Appendix 3 gives members an overview of our reserve statement. So this is all of our usable reserves that the service has access to. It shows the starting position at the 1st of April, any transfers in and out for funding different initiatives there in the middle column, and what our projected position is likely to be for reserves at the end of this financial year, which is the £15 million. And there's some narrative there to give insight into what we're doing with those things. And I think I leave it. Sorry,
there's a question from Councillor Powell.
We're using a lot of our reserves for propping up these things. Is it making a very big hole in our reserves, or are we carrying it all right?
I think, Councillor, that we've quantified the amount of transfers out there in the reserve statement. We start with just shy of 17 million, and 1.6 is taken out to support various initiatives there. And you can see that we've got just over 15 million there. So it is reducing reserves, clearly. Not
a big
not a cause for concern, and a lot of this is managed. So if I just take you through the managed underspends, that's money set aside from departmental budgets to complete some revenue work that didn't come in within the financial year. That's all earmarked to be spent. That isn't to be utilised for other things. And these are what you would call earmarked reserves. There's plans for them. And then you've got the change management reserve there, which has got the unders and overs for the budget, and will help us to meet some changes as we move forward with the service. As discussed, the cultural review item is outlined there. And then we've got the PFI equalisation reserve at the bottom, and we can't use or redirect that reserve anywhere else. It is for funding the PFI arrangement at Cardiff Gate for us. And there's some smaller bits there on capital receipts, which can only be used to fund capital schemes, and that relates to sales and auction of vehicles. And you can see at the bottom there's the joint control lease reserve of £100,000. It's the last payment this year for occupation of the joint fire control facility that we share with the police in Bridgend. So there's not a cause concern there, but yes, it is reducing reserves. I'm not sure if the Treasurer wants to add to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No. Did you want to come in for that, Chris? Or
no, I'm fine. I'm fine, thank you.
The two questions I need to put on 2.22, which is page 12, the premises cost. Are we allowing for any increase in cost? Because that overspend could increase rather than decrease because of the the price of everything is going up dramatically.
Yeah. Yes, good question, Councillor. We've got the increase in there. Last time we had an £800,000 increase for energy costs, which was electric and gas. So that's already in there.
Mm-hmm.
The other question on 2.24, which is page 13, will that be affected by our shared procurement with the other fire and rescue services? Because where we jointly buy all together, and as soon as they know it's the fire service, the price seems to increase rather than decrease.
We're lucky enough this morning. I think we've got Chris Hadfield in the room, our area manager of risk reduction.
Oh, he's not.
He's not in. This is on an all Wales basis. So costs are per contract. I think the issue for me with the home fire safety equipment is getting a better share of maybe the All Wales grant that reflects, the usage that we make of these things. At the moment, it's just an equal thirds basis of the grant. So probably not reflective of service needs, I don't think.
Yeah, the only reason I raised it, because South Wales is the bigger out of the three, and yet the percentage is a third between all of us, so.
Yes. Work is ongoing at the minute with Chris and the other area managers from the services. So a dialogue has started in terms of changing the award of the grant. When that will be bottomed out, I couldn't tell you. But you can see from 2.24 that it doesn't cover the cost of the grant. Or that
Yeah.
is a key area of our preventative work.
Yeah. That's
Ken,
good. Thanks. Yeah, go on.
specifically in relation to your element about procurement and the cost of the goods, these type of items that we buy in for home fire safety, they're all procured off national frameworks because this equipment is being issued by every fire and rescue service across the country. So in England, Wales, Scotland. So there's national framework set up to buy this type of equipment. So we're buying on a national scale. So we are having even bigger economies of scale then from the benefits of every fire and rescue service purchasing the same equipment.
Well, that's good news because that reduced the cost overall then, doesn't it? Yeah. Any other questions for Lisa before we look at the recommendations? Anybody else? Anybody in the chamber that I can't see? No.
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 No. Well, if we go to the recommendations, that the Finance Audit and Performance Management Committee note and agree to report content. So can I have somebody propose a seconder, please?
Yeah, seconded, duly noted.
Yeah, thank you very much for your support. We then move on to item 5. Sorry, number 6, sorry, I can't read my own writing. Capital Monitoring Report 2023-2024. Sorry?
Jack, can I come in just before you start the report?
Yeah,
Councillor Timothy Harvey has joined us from Newport. Councillor Harvey has been nominated at the recent council meeting as a replacement for Councillor Al Nuami. So it's Councillor Harvey's first meeting to join us today.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to apologise for being a little bit late. My other meeting overrun, so I was on Teams for that, so I had to turn that one off to turn this one on. So I do apologise for being late.
Yeah, no, thank you for the attendance, and we'll break you in gently.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, thank you, Karen, for that. Then, if you go back under item 6, then is a Capital Monitoring Report 2023-2024. And I think that's Lisa again.
It is. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
So this is the second capital monitoring report for the financial year, and it picks up on major changes since previous report. And this report provides us with information on all the capital schemes. So it's the investment type work that the service partakes in during the year. And those schemes largely fall into property, vehicles, major equipment projects and ICT infrastructure. And they're outlined on Appendix 1. Since previous reporting, there's been a decrease in forecast of costs from 4.2 million. So previously we forecast £14.8 million spend. That's decreased down to 10.5 million in the current forecast, and it'll be the column that you can see highlighted in yellow in Appendix 1. Yeah. And the big changes here are related to property. That's the main driver of the £4.2 million variance since previous reporting. And there's 3 main schemes in property that are adding to the 4.6 million variance. And that's the slippage of funding for New Inn, 1.8 million into the new year. This scheme, it doesn't mean this is not going to happen. The slippage is just a timing issue to pick schemes up in a different financial year. So we're hoping to start construction around April time for New Inn. All the preparatory work has been completed, searches, design fees, all that done. So it is literally just construction that we are waiting to commence with. Secondly is the On-Call Duty System Station Project, or OCDS. Members will be aware that a project commenced last year for 9 of our on-call stations to provide them with more better facilities, more room for storage. They've got an evolving PPE and kit requirements. We upgraded the drying room technology that they have there. This is more economically and environmentally friendly. We separated out the lecture rooms and the mess rooms for them, so they've got and separated out the clean and dirty areas. So there's more room on these stations now. And so far we've just completed Pontyclean. So we're in snagging stage for Pontyclean Fire Station, and there will be an opening to be confirmed in the new financial year for members to attend. And we started Treorchy in July. So we're halfway through that project, and the next project we are going to tackle will be Gilfach, and that's what the 1.7 million there slipped forward will be used to fund. The third, sorry.
You said Pontyclean, is Pontycummer.
Oh, Pontycummer. My apologies, all the P's.
That was a question I had for you.
Pontycummer, I do apologise. The third largest scheme they're adding to the slippage is Monmouth, and that was a collaboration with Welsh Ambulance Service Trust and police. That still may go ahead, but we're still continuing with our discussions as to a co-location. So we've slipped that money forward so that we've got it there to accommodate any build requirements should they be agreed and confirmed in the new financial year. As it is, we don't envisage anything being resolved during 23-24. If I move you on to, there's very little change in vehicles. So if I move you on to equipment, there is a £360,000 difference in reported figures since previous. That's largely due to grant funded items, so MTA equipment or marauding terrorist arms. Have I got that right, Ger? That and the use of biodiesel upgrade. So those two things there are adding to the £360,000 difference since previous reporting. Underneath, we've got a slight change, a small £80,000 decrease in projected costs for ICT infrastructure relating to backup replacement system. And we thought previously that we were going to be buying a system, and that's just altered to become a more subscription-based item, and that is just moving from capital into revenue in the coming period. At the bottom there, we've got one line for the joint control command and control system. Work for that will commence in the new financial year. Quite complex system for joint fire control system, and it's increased by £120,000 since previous reported. Those costs will be shared with Mid and West Fire and Rescue Service, who currently occupy joint fire control with us. Underneath, in Appendix 1, underneath all the spend schemes, the column in yellow, you've got a funding analysis there, which gives overview of how we intend to fund that 10.5 million. The majority of that, you will notice, will be borrowing. Just coming back to my point that we've got very little financial aid with our capital investment. We make a small contribution from revenue of 200,000, and we gain for some co-location contributions, that's 339 from our partners. There's some smaller bits from grants added to 586, some interest refunding there for solar panels, the SALEX funding, and the utilisation of capital receipts against investment in our fleet. So that's the funding part of the capital investment. So I leave it there for you, Chair, and be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from anybody in the chamber?
Yes, please, Steve, if I may.
Yeah,
On-
carry on.
Page 30, Lisa, for the rescue boat 2.2.4. No order's been placed yet due to discussions. When are these discussions being going to be completed? And are you just having these discussions with the stations that have a rescue boat?
I'll have to take that back to the fleet engineer, Councillor Morgan, and for a timeline. I think that usually these are discussed at OCG, Operation Coordination Group. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine, Lisa. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you all right with that, Councillor Morgan? Yeah.
Yes, I was in consultation with them on last week, and the boat came up.
Yeah.
So I just wondered what was happening. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Anybody else got any questions? The only one I would ask is on the Ponty Cummer one.
Yep.
When we're doing all these building work, are we going through all the stations looking for asbestos? Because a lot of these older buildings seem to have asbestos in there. So
Yep.
would we be, even if it we're looking at the funding, would we add a contingency in there for that particular issue?
Right, so yes, asbestos, there is work undertaken. As you may be aware, we've identified asbestos in the Treorchy building, as is the case for a lot of these older buildings. So there's some controlled works being progressed there. It has extended that project by a further 8 weeks and increased the budget by a further 200,000. The truth is, you don't know what you're going to find until you dig in. So we haven't inflated any of the budgets for the asbestos provision because we just don't know. Yeah.
Well, it's a classic example with the rack, you know, which was out. So nobody knows they got it until they further investigate. So I totally understand. Yeah, it was just that whether we allowed for the, you know, that contingency. Mm-hmm. Any other questions or any officers like to come in or? No, we're all quiet this morning. Must be Monday. The recommendations for us as members: note the budget and progress of capital schemes. Approve alterations identified in Appendix 1 and associated moves in funding. Somebody like to propose and second that?
Yes, second that, Chair, all noted.
Yeah, and we're all in agreement with that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine, actually. Right, if we move on to item 7, which is the Treasury Management Midterm Review Report 2023 to 24. That's page 39, and that's Chris, please.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. I didn't realise
ready with you, Chris?
I didn't realise my name was down for that one, but that's fine.
You are now.
Black and white, black and
I
white.
got on my list.
Andy, we've all got it.
I got the evidence.
Chris, I'm sorry, that must be a typo. Do you want me to
I got it there, look.
I'm completely confused. I do apologise.
Right.
That's all right, Lisa.
So you're doing it or am I doing it?
That's
Do you want me to take it?
Yeah, if you can.
Share it between.
So this is a fairly brief Treasury report insofar as Treasury reports go, and this is the second out of 3 statutory reports for the year. And this provides members with an update on information, indicators that have been set in place by the strategy, and look at the first 6 months of the financial year, which is the 1st of April to the 30th of September. So I'll just take you through the report to section 3, which gives you an overview of the Treasury position. And it opens with opening CFR being capital financing requirement. That's our underlying need to borrow. That's the amount of assets we've got sitting on our balance sheet that we need yet to fund. You will see pitted against that is our capital spending. and what we are doing to fund some of that capital spending. So that portion underneath capital spending, CIRA, partner contribution, capital receipts, capital grants, things like that, you will see that mirrored image of what we just looked at in the capital monitoring report. And then we move on to repayment of debt, which is identified by MRP, MRP being minimum revenue provision. That is the amount that we borrow for capital investment and the repayment of that borrowing. And that those things together, those three elements, provide us with a closing capital financing requirement of 45 million. So it's a movement of 5 million. Why that's important to members is that that's the benchmark at which we assess whether our borrowing is prudent or not. And it looks to be that it is, because underneath the CFR figures there, we've got some borrowing figures which starts with the opening balance of 26,737,000. We've got new borrowing that we intend to take out the last quarter of this financial year of 6 million. And then you've got repayment of 1.383 million there as well, which gives us a projected gross closing position on borrowing of 31,354,000. That is a lot lower than the 45 million CFR that you can see above, which is good for us. So it's an indication that we are not borrowing to support revenue activities. Our borrowing is wholly for capital investment, which is how we should be. Underneath, you've got some information on investments there, which we are running low because we haven't borrowed for a number of years. We are using internal cash surpluses to support our capital investment and negate the borrowing need. And that helps us sort of mitigate interest costs and things like that. So with the gross borrowing and investments, we've got a net position there. Long-term liabilities will be our PFI. So what we owe on PFI, 3.2 million. And that added to the borrowing above gives us a gross debt position. We are still under borrowed on the CFR of 10.7 million there. And I think the Treasurer has an obligation to report to members if there is any sign of difficulty there in breaching the CFI threshold. And I think we can safely report that we are fine. Underneath there, you can see some information on the operational boundary, the authorised limits and bank rates. So the TMSS is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement. That is a reminder to members on what we set in the strategy for this year. And then I've updated that in the final column there, which is largely it's unchanged for everything. The only change there being we've gone over and above the 5.78 we thought were going to be our average ratio of financial costs to revenue, just gone over 6.03%, and that's largely due to MRP charges. Going on to page 42, I've given you some more information there on bank rate and what our bank rate is with our main bank contractors, which is Lloyds. We've got some overflow arrangements with Barclays, and underneath I've given you more detail on our borrowing position, new borrowing, the breakdown of EIP, which is equal instalment of principal, and maturity. And then on page 43, just further information there again on each loan, the rate applicable to each loan, and a little explanation of what EIP and maturity point to. I update members there in the last paragraph on the intention to borrow at the end of this financial year. And then page 44 focuses on investments, average balances, the rates applicable. And the good news story here is that we've received £338,000 worth of interest in the first 6 months of this financial year, which exceeds the 334,000 that we did project for the whole year. There's a narrative update there on the fact there are no major changes and what the key indicators are, which is CFR we've just gone through, and the limits there. And the report finishes off with some interest rate forecasts which are useful for the timing of our borrowing and investment rates. And that's it really for this report, quite brief. I'll hand it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Lisa. Anybody got any questions for Lisa regarding our report?
Very concise report.
Yeah, very good.
The only question I got, Lisa, do you want to explain about where we do the borrowing, where we have a better rate by going to the PWLB?
Yeah, so PWLB is the Public Works Loan Board. We undertake the majority of our borrowing with the PWLB. They offer preferential rates to local authority bodies, which we take advantage of. The only deviation from PWLB that we've ever made, to my knowledge, is SAILEX funding. SAILEX funding is indirectly available from Welsh Government, and that's interest-free borrowing, so more preferential on the PWL borrowing, which is low, but it's not interest-free. SAILEX is interest-free, and that funding is available to help organisations pump prime efficiency, energy efficiency and sustainability projects. So we try and take advantage of that when we can. So that's it for PWLB.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Just wanted to make sure everybody knew what, where it comes from and how we deal with it and everything. That's great. Any other questions, Elisa, before we go on to the recommendations? No, we're all happy, all quiet. Well, the recommendation, yeah.
Very clear, sir.
It is very concise, very clear.
Right. The recommendation is that the Finance, Audit and Performance Management Committee is asked to recommend the following to the full Fire Authority. And are we happy to note the report and the Treasury activity therein?
Yes, noted that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody in agreement with that? Yeah. That's
Yes.
great. Well, thank you for that report, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just double check, and the next one is I've got down item 8, which is a revenue budget update report, but I have got Chris this time.
That's definitely me, Chair.
All right.
Sadly, I'd love to pass it on to somebody else, but I think I better do it. Okay. This report, members, is to consider the budget update and to recommend to the Fire Authority a budget as the basis of consultation. What we've done is a series of reports to you over the last year, sort of culminating in this position. And what I've tried to do is sort of take you through the history of the decision making so far. So it sort of takes you through in stages as to where we reached last time and what work has been done subsequently. I always stress during these meetings that this is not a final decision. This is only a recommendation to Fire Authority as the basis of consultation. You won't make a final decision on budget until February's Fire Authority meeting. In terms of where we got to date, you'll recall we have had a report on the medium-term financial strategy earlier in the year. So that built on the inflation assumptions, the budget assumptions, the various bids that had been identified in terms of maintaining the service growth in the service, etc. All that had been fed through the medium-term financial plan and was reported to yourselves at that time. And what it indicated was that we were looking at something like a 7.8% increase in budget. At the same time, we always update members in terms of what's happening within our constituent authority budgets, because obviously they're our funders. And all we had at that time was an indication that the local government financial settlement for councils for next year might be 3.1%. I stress might be, because it is only an indicative figure at this stage. Just an update on that information, really. Welsh Government budget this year is quite late. We won't have the budget from Welsh Government until after the Fire Authority in December. So that's quite unhelpful from a number of perspectives. Firstly, it doesn't give you any context in terms of the funding for councils until obviously after the Fire Authority. It doesn't give us any certainty around our grants that we will be receiving from Welsh Government for the coming year until after that Fire Authority meeting. And neither, unfortunately, has it given us any population data, which is contained within the local government financial settlement, which is the basis on which we share out our funding across the 10 councils. So in this report, normally I would be trying to give you an indication not only about the level of budget increase, but the differential impact on each council. I can't do that at this stage because we simply don't have that data at this point in time. I'm hoping that we will have it by the time of the fire authority, so we'll be able to give some indicative figures at that stage. So that's the sort of background to where we got to date. I'll run through some of the sort of risks in that when we get towards the end of the report. The key point from your last meeting, and certainly there's the scrutiny meeting as well that took place to consider the medium-term financial plan, was that there was a kind of general acceptance of the 7.8% figure, but a degree of trepidation in terms of the size of it in relation to this sort of amount of funding that was likely to be in the system for constituent councils for next year. And both the Finance Audit Performance Management Committee and the Scrutiny Committee sort of made representations that work needed to go on to actually try and get that figure down, and clearly that's something we would generally wish to do anyway. So the work that has been completed subsequent to that is contained in 2.5 of the report. The first piece of work to report to members is we have been working with Mid Wales and North Wales Fire and Rescue Services to look at our planning assumptions, and we've also been working with WLGA to feed information into Welsh Government around pressures. And that piece of work really has shown that there's a consistent pattern of budget pressures across Wales, so we're not an outlier in respect of the sorts of information that have been put before you to date. However, we have looked at a number of things in terms of the budget, some of the assumptions underpinning the budget in terms of inflation and pressures, the bids submitted by service areas in particular, in terms of whether there were any other ways of funding those, or whether we can actually absorb them through savings within existing budgets, options for funding costs other than from the base budget, and there we're thinking about reserve funds, and any savings that could be secured for both this and next year. You've obviously heard from Lisa already the pressure on the existing revenue budget, so you know that there's already pressure built up in the system, and we know that that's mainly around pay and price inflation that's driving some of those increases. We were aware of that when we set the budget last year, and it's sort of coming to fruition, but that doesn't stop the work in the current year to actually drive that down for next year. So what we've highlighted in the tables there in paragraph 2.5 is that to date we've identified just over £2 million worth of reductions that we believe we can safely include within the budget work. So that those are a combination of reductions, savings, different assumptions within the budget. But inevitably, when we do that detailed dive, we also come up with new information that causes us to perhaps reassess the budget upwards in some areas. And they're included in the second table within 2.5 as well. Some of those are obviously being driven by some of the work that Lisa has already reported in the revenue budget monitoring, things like the home fire safety work, where the budget for that is under pressure, where we're exceeding the grant funding that's available. But other things like the fact that we are uncertain yet about the impact of the Strikes Minimum Service Levels Act in Wales, and therefore we might actually have to bolster our auxiliary service, particularly in respect of our control operation. So there's a need, basically, recall members, we have auxiliary firefighters to take appliances out in the event of strikes. We also need to consider that we might need auxiliary control operators in the control centre to actually do such work as well. So that's sort of been identified as a potential cost. And we've also had the initial results of the firefighter pension scheme valuation report, which is indicating that there's going to be a small pressure on that budget as well. So there's a number of decreases and some increases that have gone along with that. The result of that is that if you include those within the budget work now, we have reduced the 7.8 down to 5.8%, which is obviously going in the right direction. I would say in paragraph 2.5 of the report, 2.55 of the report, sorry, we have highlighted there is a technicality here, because as a result of pension funding, there's a possibility that Welsh Government will actually increase costs to fire authorities, but also increase grant to councils. And therefore, we might see that 5.8% like-for-like increase actually show up as a 7.2% headline increase. Now, that's not something members need to worry about at this moment in time, but it happened in the current year when we set the current year's budget, and we might see the same thing happen again. It's just for noting really that the headline figure might show up as bigger, but the like-for-like increase is the 5.5 that we've highlighted there. In terms of the consultation budget, one of the things that has been a theme throughout the discussions on budget, it was raised by members in the Finance Committee, it was raised by members in the Scrutiny Committee, and it's been raised by councils as well, is the level of usable reserves. Just to inform members, if you weren't already aware, we do have a formal consultation exercise that takes place between the December Fire Authority meeting and the February Fire Authority meeting. So that's when councils can sort of feedback their thoughts on the budget recommendation. We also are in the process of informal budget consultations with our constituent councils as well, and we're about probably halfway through that exercise. So we've already done a session with Gwent Chief Executives, we've done a session with Newport, we've done a session with Torvine, Caerphilly, and RCT, I believe, and I think we've still got some of the other councils to go, but the intention is to go through them all, so we can sort of hear this information to prepare them for when the budget consultation comes out proper. So that exercise is continuing, but inevitably during those meetings they have also expressed their concern about the level of budget and have asked about usable reserves. So what we've done in this report for members' information is produced a sort of schedule there in the report, annex under paragraph 2.6.2, which just outlines the level of reserves. For anybody who's really obsessive about these reports, if you actually do a compare between this and the revenue monitoring report that went through earlier, you'll see there are slight differences, and there's a reason for that, and that's because this report is very much trying to project forward in time, as opposed to leases, which is a kind of statement in time in terms of the revenue budget monitoring position. So we're trying to show where reserves are fully committed here, and therefore not available to support the budget. And we're also factoring in, of course, some of the items in paragraph 2.5 that I've just mentioned actually themselves require use of reserves, so they are shown in this table as well. And what it shows is our reserves falling from a level of around £17 million at March 23 to possibly around £13 million in March 25. The key point for members to note, and this was a question that was raised at scrutiny, was to what extent are those reserves committed, and to what extent they're not. And what we've indicated there is the sort of nature of the reserve, how it was set up, and whether it's fully committed or not in terms of known liabilities. The point to be discussed here really is if the authority were minded to utilise reserves to support the budget, and I'll remind you that it already is as a result of some of the decisions you've considered already. There are elements of reserve funding in there. Then you would obviously have to be aware that you have to get out from under that use of reserves in future. And there's several ways of doing that. Obviously, it could be through the identification and delivery of further savings to actually remove the use of reserves, or of course you could increase the base budget in future years to actually take out the use of reserves, or some combination of both. So basically members need to be aware of that. I'm sure members are aware in the press, there's been some high profile news coming out of England, particularly around section 114 notices. Nottingham City Council were the most recent to do this, but Birmingham's gone before, and a number of small councils as well up and down the country in England.
Isn't there one in Wales?
I don't think there's one in Wales. I don't think there's one in Wales formally yet.
Not formal yet, is it? Right.
I've not heard any formally in Wales yet. There are a couple on the borders, I think, that have occurred. So members again will recall that we took the decision to sign up to the Financial Management Code last year and the year before. There was some work done around that. And that is aimed really about the sustainability of your budgets going forward, and in particular that sort of use of reserves to support budgets it can be done. There's nothing to stop it being done, but it must be done on a sustainable basis, and it must be done against a against a plan, a financial plan, which actually resolves that issue going forward, so you don't end up in a situation where you're overcommitted on your budget, you're overcommitted in terms of your reserves, and can't rectify that. For illustrative purposes only, a 1% reduction in the budget would require the use of £894,000 worth of reserves. So that just puts the context in terms of the sort of figure that you would need to consider if you were minded to actually utilise reserves more generally to support the budget. But again, as I said already, that decision is a decision for that you're recommending to Fire Authority at this point in time, and Fire Authority can consider that information. Obviously, if you've got views as a committee, then I'm more than happy to answer questions on those considerations at this point in time. Against that background, paragraph 2.8 of the report just outlines some of the risks there. I mean, they're to some extent self-evident from what I've already said. One of the key ones is the level of inflation for the coming year, and in particular pay increases. You've considered this matter several times during the medium-term financial plan. When we set assumptions in the budget, we obviously have to try and second guess what pay inflation is going to be and what price inflation is going to be coming year. We have seen headline figures come out showing the rate of inflation is slowing. So October 4.6 was released as a general inflation factor in the economy. So things are starting to move in the right direction. But this budget assumes a 3% pay award. So therefore, we need to be confident that that is a realistic figure. And it could be exceeded. It was exceeded in our current year budget. And we've ended up in a situation where we're overspending as a result of that. It could happen again, so that's a key risk in terms of our budget. We've clearly got the uncertainty around Welsh Government grant funding. We've heard announcements from Welsh Government that we've had a position where they are under pressure in the current year, and they are indicating that their budget for next year is going to be quite tight, and therefore there's a possibility they could cut grant funding. That would have an impact on our budget as well. The projected in-year overspend will need to be met from reserves, and the question that was posed earlier by the chair, which is, well, can that overspend go up as well as down? Yes, of course it can.
Yes, it can.
It can still worsen from the position we're currently projecting. I've already mentioned the need to set a sustainable budget beyond 2024-25, so we would have to identify savings or other mechanisms to sort of balance the budget. And obviously the failure to identify and or deliver those savings would be a key issue. So those are the kind of key financial risks really in a nutshell around this report. So as a result of the work to date, the report recommends that you recommend to Fire Authority a 5.8% increase in budget as the basis of consultation. I'm going to stop talking there. And if members have got questions in terms of that or kind of where we go from here, then I'm more than happy to answer.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say, Chris, is a very, very hard-working report. There's a lot of effort gone into it. But as you can appreciate, a lot of it's built on uncertainties until we get the settlement or anything else. So thank you for the report. It is really, I know it's been a really difficult one, but at least you put it as clear and concise for us to look at. Anybody got any questions for Chris?
No, I just agree with what you said. We always get very clear and concise reports from Chris, good, bad or indifferent. So I recommend that.
So anybody else got any questions before we move to the recommendations?
No.
No? For the recommendations, the members note the financial risks within the report and recommend a 5.8 increase in budget to the Fire Authority as a basis of the consultation. Are we all happy with that?
Yes, we are.
All members, yeah?
Yes.
If you like somebody move and second it, then we know it's correct.
Second it.
Thank you both. Right, we move on to item 9, which is Statement of Accounts 2022 to 2023. So I got Lisa for this one, so.
Thank you, Chair. So this report covers the audited statement of accounts. So members would have seen the draft in July that was presented, so I won't go through the statement of accounts in detail. So it's got the final statement of accounts, the statutory audit report or ISA 260 report, which I let my colleague from Audit Wales cover off, and letter of representation. And this is a statutory report that set of reports that come to members each year, generally a little bit earlier. But I'm sure Jill Gillette will cover off those bits now in covering off the ISA 260. Are you all right to take over from you, Jill?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Can everyone hear
Thank
me
you.
okay?
Yes, that's great. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lisa. So then in Appendix 2 in that pack, as Lisa says, is our Audit of Accounts report, our ISA 260 report, which summarises the main findings from our audit of your 22-23 financial statements. The first thing to say, it's a positive report and the Auditor General intends to issue an unqualified opinion. I'd just like to say we've continued to work very well with the finance team throughout the slightly extended accounts process. So we'd just like to express our thanks for the help and support in providing us with the audit evidence we've needed. It's very much a team effort to get here. I'd also like to note that we got the draft accounts at the end of May, and that the audit work was largely completed by the end of August, subject to property asset values being uplifted to reflect their estimated values as at 31st of March 23, and there are details of that in Appendix 3. Now that we've completed our audit work, there are just a couple of matters that we are required to report to you under auditing standards before you approve the financial statements. So in paragraph 9, we set out that we intend to issue an unqualified opinion once we've received the letter of representation, which is set out in Appendix 1, and then the proposed audit opinion is set out in Appendix 2. As I said, that's an unqualified opinion and reflects very well on the team and the authority. And in paragraph 11, we note that there are no uncorrected misstatements in the accounts. Paragraph 12 highlights that there were some misstatements in the draft accounts, but these have now been corrected in the final version and had no impact on the authority's net expenditure position. But there are further details of those in Appendix 3. So say it's a very positive report and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
My sound done without. Anybody got any questions to Julian? Can I just say it's a very, very in-depth report. There's a lot in there, and it's been done well. So I'd like to thank Audit Wales and the staff. You know. Anybody got any questions for Julian? Because otherwise she's getting away lightly. Well, I think they all enjoyed the report, Julian and Lisa. So
Thank you.
Thank you for that anyway. But yeah, it's good bedtime reading anyway. But
It is.
The recommendations then, if nobody's got any questions, because I've read it and I thought it was good, that members receive the ISA 260 report of the appointed auditor and note the letter of representation contained therein. And our part is that members note the audited statement of accounts provided electronically. So are we happy to note that? And somebody like
Note
to
it.
move it? Yeah.
Move it.
Seconded, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Van. You got away quite easy, Gillian. We now move on to reports for information. Item 10, which is the Internal Audit Progress Report and Audit Action Update 187. Is that Steen's now, Lisa?
It is. I just
Yeah.
draft the covering report. We've got one completed audit report for this FAPM. It covers off pensions, and so I'll hand you over to capable hands of Steen Goley from TIAA. Thank you, Steen.
Thank you, Steen. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So yeah, just the two reports this time around. So you've got the management summary for the pensions audit that we undertook, and you've got the progress report, which we call a SICA, statement of internal control assurances, because the progress report. In terms of the pensions, it's probably just worth giving you an outline of what the scope was. So we're looking at the administration arrangements around the pension within the service. So as a counter to that, we're not looking at RCT, so the providers processes. We've also not included any administration around any of the the remedies on McLeod, for example, members will be aware we looked at that as part of the risk audit last year. So this time, for some substantial assurance, no recommendations in relation to the pension audit. Good processes in place. We did sample testing of starters, levers, changes and how those affected the pension, and how those changes were communicated to the pension provider RCT. And no issues were identified in any of the testing that's taken. So happy to take any questions on the pensions report before moving on.
Anybody got any questions, Christine, regarding the pensions?
No.
I know it's a bit of a minefield with everything on McLeod, and you know the staff have been tirelessly, you know, having to deal with all that. Anybody got any questions, Christine? No. He's another one that got off it easy then. That's fine, Steve. And if you wanted to move on to the next one, then please, if you would.
So the next one is just the progress report. It references that this report is the pensions report is in your back. In terms of the kind of outstanding work, you'll see a lot of the kind of the Appendix A and the Appendix B progress against plan are in colours. That would indicate that either the field work is ongoing or they're at draft stage. So just to give members assurance, obviously this progress report was drafted a few weeks ago. Since then, anything that's been outstanding is at draft stage, is either with the director for review or with our delivery support team for issue. The other thing just to note in terms of the work for 23-24, there are some days that we hadn't booked in as yet, but we had an exercise internally within the team last week. I haven't had a chance to communicate those suggested dates to Lisa and the team yet, but we'll do that this week, and we'll be looking then to get all of the work booked in and completed prior to year end, so we can produce ahead of internal audit opinion for 23-24.
When will that report to us?
Apologies.
Yeah.
I don't know which one. All right. When will that report come to us? You said you've got some dates in the you got to put dates in the diary. When will we have that report?
In terms of the dates, that will be to conclude the remaining items with the remaining orders for the 23-24. I think the annual report usually comes February, March time, I think, to yourselves. If we haven't finished the work, if not everything is at final, what we tend to do then is give an indicative opinion. So that forms part of your accounts for next year, but the time of that will be dependent on us finishing the audits. But yeah, it'll be February, March time. If not, then the next audit committee after the year.
Okay, thank you.
You all right with that, Jen? Yeah. I'd like to say the Appendix A and Appendix B was very good reading, especially with the colour coordination. You were able to adapt it quite easy, so I thought that was a very good positive. So yeah. But I haven't got any other questions. Anybody else before we move to the recommendation? No? Well, the recommendations, the members are asked to note the internal audit recommendations and work completed to date on the internal audit annual plan. Is everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So we're happy to note that?
Yes.
Right. If you move on to item 11, which is the forward work programme for the Finance Audit and Performance Management Committee 2023 to 2024, and that's page 203.
Yeah.
And I think that's usually, well, Garen, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, just the standard forward work programme for the municipal year for the Finance Audit and Performance Management Committee. Obviously outlines all the reports that have already gone to the committees beforehand and the agenda items for today's meeting, and then sets out the remainder of the programme for the year, for the March meeting. Obviously, it is in draft. If members feel there's other reports that need to be added to the agenda for the March meeting, by all means contact myself or Lisa, and we'll ensure that any additional reports are included. So happy to take any questions or observations, Chair.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It always is, and we're always allocated them so we can work out what's coming towards us, and so.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's great for that. Thank you for that. Just to note that. The last item on the agenda is item 12. Consider the items that the chairperson deems urgent. There isn't, but I would like to say thank you to the officers and the staff and the audit team for these reports, because they're very comprehensive and there's a lot of work gone into them.
Yes.
And you know, myself as a chair, that quite happy to work with these, because you know we get everything we ask for. So, and we're not afraid to challenge anyway. So, thank you all for that.
And we all say, yeah.
Yeah. So on that, you can go back to your tea and cakes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
So thank you everybody for attending the meeting.
Oh, no,
Thank you,
Yeah.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you all. I'll see you soon. Ta-ra.
That's it. Next one.
Have a nice Christmas, everyone.
Diolch yn fawr.